Hi, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it. If you're new here, please subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. And if you're joining again, thank you so much. Hey. Today, I'm going to be talking to you guys about 5 things that I wish I knew before I started crocheting. These are just like simple things that first come to mind when I think about it now. I have been crocheting I have been crocheting for quite some time now. However, in the beginning, I crocheted and I stopped for quite a while. I just didn't feel like I was getting it and I had the time and I was enjoying it as much. And it wasn't until maybe about 2 years ago, it wasn't until about almost 3 years ago that I realized I truly, truly love crocheting and I was doing it consistently. So I would say in total, I would say I've been crocheting for maybe 4 or 5 years, but consistently and learning for at least 3 of those years. So these are the things that I wish I knew years ago that I probably would be way more advanced now, but I am where I am. I'm thankful. I love it. These are my tips. The first thing that I wish I knew before I started like really getting into crocheting as a hobby is how much time it takes. And what I mean by this is you have to have the time to allow yourself to understand and learn. This is almost like learning an entirely new language. So give yourself patience, give yourself time. But once you do get to that point, it also takes time. You don't really get projects done quickly, it takes time. So allow yourself time. If you want to make a gift for somebody, you have to know in advance because it takes time. So, one thing that I wish I knew and understood is how much time it takes. I do think that it is easy to see on social media the amount of things people crochet in a week or in a month, and they have like stacks of things that they were able to complete. But, and I'm not saying that that's not possible, but look, I'm a mom of three. I am busy to say the least. And so my crochet time comes during my quiet time or on the weekends when we have free time. It's not all the time. But I know there's people out there who don't have kids and they have more time for their hobbies individually, and they do have more time on their hands to crochet. So they probably are getting a lot more done. But whatever your situation, just allow yourself to have time to both understand what you're learning, what you're doing, but also to do a project, like give yourself time. Number two is storage. I talk about storage and I'm also going to categorize this as yarn because I feel like hooks and stuff don't take up a lot of storage, but once we start talking about yarns and different types of yarn, and you're going to want to experiment with different brands, and maybe you do just love one brand, but one day maybe you'll want to try a different brand and just see how it feels, or a different texture or a different material. You're going to want to have the space to put these things. You're going to want to make sure that you have space to put them. It's not a huge deal. When I first started out, I had just a bin. It was a just one of those small bins that you can get at Walmart or Hobby Lobby, and my yarn fit in there perfectly because I didn't have a ton, but I had enough that fit in there. And then eventually it started overflowing, and I was like, oh, it's not fitting in here anymore. So if you are maybe in a very small apartment building, or you just are limited on space, maybe you're renting a room or whatever the case may be, um, maybe just commit to using as little bit of yarn as you can, and finding somewhere cute or nice that you like it, that you can put it, that you can store it, that you can see it. Sometimes when I stored my yarn in bins, which I have before, it became harder for me to know what was at the bottom of the bin, or if I just didn't feel like it, or if I thought I didn't have a color and I did, or vice versa. So make it easy for yourself, but also maybe make it nice. I've seen the cutest like yarn walls where you can see all the yarn that people have, or I've seen people build like the shelving and put their yarn in there, which is also super cute. If you have the space for that, great. If not, there are alternatives, but just make sure that you know when you start this hobby, you are going to buy yarn and you're going to want to have space for the yarn so you're not just like living on yarn. Also, with that, I'm going to also say the money, the cost of yarn. The cost of yarn doesn't have to be extremely expensive. Obviously, there are higher end yarns that you can buy that are more expensive depending on the material and the brand, but there's also very cheap yarn and it works just as well. You can still create and make beautiful things. So just know that it will cost money to get the yarn. So that's all a part of this as well. But I imagine any hobby that you take, you kind of are spending money, whether that be in the beginning, the middle, or the end, or during the whole process. Typically, you're spending something. So just keep that in mind as well. Also, with the storage part or with the yarn part, I do want to add that even if you say, hey, I'm only going to buy this yarn to do this project, and you complete that project, you might have yarn left over. And then you do another one, and then you'll have yarn left over from that. And then you do another one, and then you have yarn left over from that. And then you just are constantly building yarn up from yarn, even if you are finishing the projects and you're not trying to overstore yarn. Just keep in mind that you might not use all of those things. Some of the things that I do with my scrap yarn is currently I'm making the scrap blanket. It's been really fun project so far. And it helps me condense my yarn and gets rid of the extra. Also, sometimes you buy yarn before knowing what project you're going to do, and then you never end up using it. So just keep all those things in mind when it comes to yarn and storage. Number three, I put down using a bigger hook and bigger yarn. If you're going to start crocheting, it is totally fine if you do start with thin yarn, but it might be a little intimidating and it also might be discouraging because when you start, you're going to say, how long is this going to take? It is going to feel like it's going to take decades. You're learning something new. It's super tiny. Your hands are going to cramp because you're not used to like this new movement that you're doing. And so it's just going to be a lot. However, if you do start with bigger, thicker yarn and a bigger hook, it is going to make your project complete much faster, but it's also going to help you understand and learn what it is that you're doing. You're able to see it better with a bigger hook and a bigger size yarn. You're able to see what you're doing a lot better than smaller yarn and a smaller hook. And then you can also get comfortable with it as well. And that leads me to say that you should find simple patterns. That's my number four. And I believe that if you start with just YouTube patterns, there's a ton of patterns everywhere that you can use. But I do feel like if you start with patterns on video where you're able to see somebody else do the movement that you are trying to do, it's a lot easier because then you are able to see what it's supposed to look like because you're learning an entire new language, if you will. And so written patterns might be a little bit more difficult when you're first starting, and it might be discouraging if you're like, what am I doing? And what does, SLP and what is ST1 and what is F, or BLO? Like you don't know any of the lingo. And so hearing somebody say what it is as you're watching them do it definitely helped me start my crochet journey. So for me, written patterns in the beginning was almost like impossible. But once I understood what I was doing, the movements I was making, and all of those things, written patterns became easier. But if I started with written patterns and just try to guess what this was and try to remember what movement that was, it would have been a disaster. And the last one, number 5, tip number 5, I just listed don't give up. Enjoy the journey, learn something new. If you figure out how to do a stitch and you want to learn a new one the next week, do it. If you love making hats and you made 100 hats, but now you're like, oh, I'm tired of making hats, it's okay. Learn how to do another garment or learn how to do a blanket or learn, like, the possibilities of crocheting are endless. So just don't give up. Feel like don't give up and just enjoy and love the journey that you are on of crocheting. I hope you enjoy your journey. I hope these tips help you. And if you are on your journey right now and something is like concerning you, or if you can relate to any of these things, please let me know down in the comments below. Thank you again so much for joining in. Bye.